Okay, we should be recording. Some indication of that. Oh, there it is. I do. Okay, cool. So good. So this is running through serverless demo. We're going to start from scratch and do the setup so that one, so that you can repeat it, and then two, so that I can go back and capture it as a document that everyone can use instead of watching a video. So I think we're set up. What I do in general as an overview, actually I should find this slides. Wait, pause the recording. Pause the recording. Okay, we're recording again. Okay, so I'll go over kind of just a little quick preso that I put together just to kind of talk about it and obviously customize this to whatever your audience is. This was originally done at the New York meetup group of the serverless and cloud native computing, so mostly cloud native computing and Kubernetes. And so pretty technical discussion right off the bat, but I did some introduction of, you can see here, so right, once run anywhere serverless, hi, this is me. What's GitLab? So a little bit of first, like what's GitLab, because not everybody knows that. I always start with making the point like, hey, there's lots of tools, and people go, oh yeah, I have this tool and that tool, and making the point that the need to have all of these different tools tied together and building your the arrows down there, that has to be managed and maintained. And usually about that point you get everyone nodding their head, yep, I certainly have that pain. Just because I know a lot of people come from, hey, your GitLab, GitHub, what? How's that different than GitHub? I don't say GitHub here, but I say, that this is like, popular SCM systems where we've come from being known as an SCM system, but we've grown a lot since then. So originally, like some of our competitors, we, source code management, code review, et cetera. But and we do have that, but we also look at covering across all of, all these other things across the whole development life cycle. And then I bring this slide up to just kind of talk about, and here's kind of that plus where we're heading. And I use this as an excuse for this thing because we are focusing on specifically Kubernetes and really serverless configurations, zero in. Like this is a small part of what we do, but it does tie into everything. So that's just kind of giving a context of what they're about to see in context of all of GitLab. I mentioned that that Kubernetes has given us infrastructure abstraction. There's different cloud providers. Kubernetes has become the one real unified interface for container management. Similarly to what's going on with serverless right now, Kubernetes started there, which was, hey, there's lots of different ways to do container management, and Kubernetes rose to the top. There's a lot of ways to do serverless, OpenFaaS, kubeless, Fission, OpenWhisk, etc. And Knative, sponsored by the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, I think that's right, has and from Google has risen to the top basically. So that's kind of that's the one that we're placing our bet on. And so with Kubernetes and Knative and GitLab together, on top of all that infrastructure, you have multi-cloud serverless, and that's what we're about to take a look at. And the stack basically is infrastructure, whatever it is, coming from either real infrastructure or whether it's coming from on-prem infrastructure, hardware, cloud providers, if they're VMs. Orchestration is solidified with the Kubernetes. Your server and eventing for serverless come from Knative, and doing the functions and applications and actually creating them and pushing them out is GitLab serverless. And that is what we're going to take a look at. GitLab serverless offers functions and apps on Kubernetes. It means that you focus not on the container level at all. That gets managed for you by Knative and Kubernetes. And you focus only on the code and what it's actually providing, and it gets spun up and gives you the ability to spin down all the way to zero and all the way back up to what you need. So easy to set up and use because we're doing it through GitLab and all of the built-in apps. And it's all part of the single application, single interface that we talked earlier about the value of. So that quick kind of intro, and then go into the demo. Questions on that? Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if that'll fit your audience, but for the meetup, that worked well. So. Okay, so we're going to start, the path we're going to take, and I don't have a slide for this, is basically we're going to create a new project. I'm going to pull in some really simple serverless function code. We're going to attach a cluster to GitLab, install serverless on top of that, or Knative, sorry, on top of that, and show how easy that is. Then I'm going to run my pipeline, which will basically deploy my function, and then we're going to interact with the function and see how it works. So, I'm going to just do this in my own space. So we'll just create a new project. Do a bunch of waiting for like things to process. We'll call it serverless function. Let's see, I've done it before. I just make it public because, you know, default. Oh, I just tweaked this. Sorry, not going to do it this way. Take that back. Rewind. Well, actually, this is okay. We'll create a new project. So I've been pulling it out of my my directory because I hadn't pushed it up into like a clean space. But ta-da! So this is where we'll pull it from. You know, we'll have to put this in the doc, but it's basically under gitlab.com pmm demos templates serverless function. We will instead we'll import from URL. A little bit easier. Serverless function. We still haven't yet kind of rocked the need between project name and project slug, but I'll make that public. We'll create it. Oh, I know I didn't do this before. Oh, I wonder if that got fixed. So the night that I was doing this, yeah, good, they fixed it. There was a bug on GitLab.com where you couldn't import projects. It just spun forever. So that's why I did it. Okay, so here we are. We have a project. We've got our files in our repository. We'll look at those while we're spinning up the cluster. So the very first thing you should do is go spin up the cluster because it's going to take like a while, depending on how Google is that day. It can take anywhere from, it can go, I mean, you've done probably plenty of cluster spin up, so 5 to like 8 minutes.
Right.
So we have a project. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go to ops and Kubernetes, and we're going to add a Kubernetes cluster. We're going to do this one through the GKE integration. I actually already logged in, so you might have to log in. We're going to call it serverless PMM serverless demo. That's, I put PMM so that we can find it in the mess, but you can call it whatever you want. I'm putting them in GitLab internal because that's a space that seems to be less used and doesn't run into resource contention and IP contention. Central 1A is fine. 3 nodes, M2 standard, RBAC enabled, and let that start rolling. So that'll come back to us in a little bit. I usually have a console up so I can show like, hey, look, it's in the internal space, and build in a cluster so we can sort of something happening. Now, this tells you what's building the engine. It'll come back and tell you when it's done, but this at least gives you a turning thing that proves to the audience that you've connected out to a system and you're doing something. So while that's going, I will usually, what I did was I hopped over to, usually I've done this once, I'll hop over to the files and kind of start going through them to just explain what we've got going there. So if we look at this, there's a simple README, and there is a GitLab YAML file here, which is basically doing the pipeline for pushing this, building and pushing. So if we look at it, we're basically using a new functionality in pipelines definition, which is called basically includes and extends. So the include file is a template file we have, GitLab serverless.gitlab.ci.yaml. That you don't normally need to know where it is, but that happens to be here in GitLab CE lib, GitLab CI templates. I found it, I don't remember how. You can also find these by, if you want to look at the file, it's kind of a shortcut. And you're like, hey, I don't know what this is. You can, if you create a new file and then you say GitLab CI YAML that list of them, then I think you can actually find this one there as well. It basically pulls from this directory, which has all these different templates, which nobody knows we have. So here, serverless.gitlab CI YAML. And so we can see this is the file that we're pulling our our um, our CIML file details from. So for the build, so we're going to do functions, um, and it basically extends that serverless build function. So basically, it means that we're taking this from the file, what did I say, build functions, and then we're basically going to use this. So we're going to build environment is set to development, but here we're going to override that to production. And then it's going to go get a tool called GitLab KTL, which is fairly new, which basically is like Trigger Mesh. It's our own version that's I believe is more agnostic, but there was a reason we needed to do our own. And basically, we're going to run serverless build and serverless deploy. If you look at the earlier parts of this, which I kind of jumped over for development environment, we're going to go get that same thing. We're not extending it, we're just doing it here, and we're going to run serverless build, serverless deploy again. So, but to our development environment. So pretty straightforward from the CI pipeline perspective. The serverless.yaml defines the function that we're going to, well, in this case, we're going to do a function rather than and it's called Echo, and there's a runtime. It's Node.js, so it's a runtime that's defined that we're going to pick up and use, and that's about it. And description information. Let's see how we're doing on that. Okay, that's up. So that should show us here that it's done. So we'll have more chance to come back to that because now you got to install Tiller. This is the package manager, right, for Kubernetes, so that we can install other things. So we'll go ahead and install that, and then we can install some of the other stuff. So in the meantime, going back, we're looking at the files, looking at the echo. So this is our code, and we've got the package, etc. But if we look at the main code, it's a simple Node.js. It's kind of the hello world of serverless for Node.js. It's going to echo back what we send it. We don't go into more detail than that. And that's pretty much the setup. So let's see how we are on our install. Good. So this is installed. So now we're going to install Prometheus. And I've been warned that with Knative, this is not for the demo, but for you, with Knative and with Prometheus, right now there's some interactions. So you need to actually get Prometheus installed first. I know with the other demos, we can bam, 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 install like 3 things at once. But here, make sure Prometheus is installed before you, and you can kick off the runner too if you need, before you install Knative. Now, we don't need to install the runner since we're on GitLab.com and there's plenty of shared runners. So I'll just leave that and not have more stuff we're installing. One thing I do, which is kind of fun, now that we've got this running, this is our cluster. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to it over here so that we can, let's see, what is okay? I did, cool. Pods, spaces. Okay, cool. So I'm going to do watch, and this won't work. So we'll watch kubectl, get pods, all namespaces. So basically, leave this running because you can kind of see stuff happening as it's going on. Like I can see that the Prometheus container is being created and install Prometheus is up and running and doing its thing. So that's just kind of fun. You can watch that. And then you got to fill that airtime. You figure out what to show or talk about. So actually, at this point, what I did was I had set up a regular pipeline because I was realizing like, look, we're just focused in on this little narrow part of what GitLab is and what it can do. So I actually had up because I had run through this and knew I was going to run into a problem here. Let's do it from scratch. I actually just had up a pipeline, an auto DevOps pipeline that we had run so that I could hop over and talk about like that like, not just serverless and simple pipelines, but that you can find, you can describe like a normal pipeline. So I had one into like Spring App Secure 2, which I knew I'd run. Went to pipeline. I have this up already, but no, slow. All right, so basically pull this up and kind of talk through like, okay, so serverless is one thing, but GitLab does a lot more. You can define your own pipelines. We have one that's out of the box that does a whole bunch of things. And I like, the auto DevOps one because you can talk about, all of the capabilities around security and scanning and all that come out of the box, right? And the review app and the fact that that gets set up, you can interact with it and you can do dynamic scanning and performance and all that stuff, right? So I use that so we can talk about kind of other parts of GitLab while we're waiting for this to get done. Prometheus gets installed, good. So now we're going to install Knative. Now with Knative, when you install it, you have to have a domain name already set up. So this is kind of the catcher. We can't do nip.io because that's based off an IP address. And since we don't, you notice we didn't install the ingress like we usually do for other demonstrations because Knative uses Istio, which has its own load balancer. And that's the one that gets attached to an IP address during the install. So we can't use nip.io as a trick because we don't know what the IP address is. So you have to kind of have a domain, a valid domain set up. I use Tanuki host. We're going to have to be careful about overlapping and all that. But so what you could do if you want to use Tanuki host, which you'll probably, I'm pretty sure everyone has access to. This is under, go here first before I heard. This is under network services, cloud DNS. And then Tanuki host is the one that I've been using. Now what's cool with this though is, I'm going to try this out. I can add, since it's star whatever, and we have the whole domain, that means if you're going to do this, you could do one with your initials, for example, right? So I think this will work. We'll add a record set. You can see the DNS name is star dot serverless func dot dbg, my initials. And then we don't yet know what the IP address is. So we'll just leave that for now. I'm kind of laying it here, as you can see. It wasn't propagating that. Now it's propagating that. That's awesome. So what we'll do is we'll do that. So that's our valid domain that we can put in here. serverlessfunc.dbg.tanuki.host. And then I can say install. So it's going to install Knative with that domain as the one to use. And then it's going to install Istio, do a load balancer, or set up a load balancer, request an IP address, a public IP address, and set that up. Once that does, it should list that out here, and then we'll have to take that IP address and go back to DNS and actually make sure that the proper IP address is attached. So again, we can see what's going on here. Installing Knative. You can see that that is getting installed. Prometheus is into GitLab managed apps. So this demo is the name of our thing. Some more downtime. So now here's where you song and dance about some other pipe. Not only do we have pipelines, but you can also do like Jira stuff. Not sitting on. So there's some downtimes that you want to like figure out, okay, like, you don't want to give whiplash like flying all over the product, but like a good one for this is we go to I got and set up ahead of time a few stalls that you can. I haven't figured out yet how to streamline this demo yet. But you could like do a stall and go like, oh, this is GitLab Enterprise. We develop it on GitLab, and you can go look at it and give input, and like here's how we use our boards, and we have boards. It's like Jira, etc. Right? You can see different boards for different milestones. This is where you want to know which one to go to. Right? Ultimate. I don't know if there's anything there. No idea. Maybe not. Anyways, so you can stall with that a little bit. And then hopefully this will, and this is also a place where you might stop and ask questions, right? So you don't have any questions about what they've seen so far. We're talking to a technical audience, so you can see Istio here, ooh, taking up a bunch of space. Holy cow. Yeah, this stuff is hungry. Not small. Istio is getting itself set up. Native Ingress Gateway. There we go. So we got our IP. We're going to go back to DNS and we need to edit our domain name here, our DNS, our A name, a record, and put in an appropriate IP. So what we've done now is we've set this anything coming into serverless.func.dbg.tanuki.host is going to be referenced to this load balancer IP address, and then Istio will take over from there. And that's going to happen because it's going to set up a bunch of dynamic names like function, blah, 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 some hash, right? As the location. So that's good. So that means we're now DNS'd up. And that's it. So that has our cluster set up and Knative set up. Now we've got our code already. So actually, we just need to run a pipeline. I'm going to go ahead and kick one off because I do have a code. We do. That's right, because I imported it. So we'll go ahead and kick off a pipeline to master, and that's going to basically run the stuff that we looked at earlier from our pipeline. And while that's going, what we'll do is we'll go to serverless, a different tab. And we should see nothing and then something. It's still building the function. No functions. I'm just realized I'm going to get another window because I'm showing off there. That's it. That's deploying the function right now. And you can click in, and I'm not sure it really shows all that much exciting stuff, but using Docker executor, it's getting GitLab KTL, and it's going to use the deployment. And at some point, it says, make sure that the surface function show up. Yeah, like I said, right now this is a very functional, technical demo. It's not a like here's quickly the value of the of serverless and GitLab. Haven't gotten there yet. We're still early. So I apologize. This is so drawn out. This is flying by the seat of our pants here. So now we have a function. I can copy. Oops. I'll click on that button. I can copy it because this is not a web-based function. This is just a function that goes away and processes something. So up here, I have this on hand. We're going to basically use curl to. We're going to use curl, and we're going to. We're going to use curl, and we're going to use that then to request, we're going to post data, name colon GitLab, to our function. And our function is now this one. We just set up, blah, 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 serverless function, some number, serverless func, dbg to make a post. And that should give us a return of the syntax. Okay, we're back. So I had a syntax, I had an error in my line. It replaced the last quote here on GitLab with a smart quote. Don't know where that came from, and that was triggering a syntax error. So this is the correct line: curl header content type application JSON request post data. These should be the regular ASCII quotes, not the smart quotes. And then the URL to your function, which is what we've created here. And then what that should do is that should return name and GitLab. This is JSON, remember, so not too sexy, but there it is. Now, what's cool though is we can actually go in and look here, and we can see we've run it twice. We've got 2 of these guys, and we've got our graph showing us what's going on. So I've had one instance, but I think if we wait for a minute, that should settle out. Maybe. But here's what I can do. I'm going to back down this. I'm going to run it a bunch of times, basically. Here we go. So we can see that I had how many invocations, and then I jumped to the 14 that I just did right away. So we requested 14 times. It responded fast enough that an existing container was able to run the function again, which is why you're not seeing 14 containers. But it did see those 14 requests. So I don't know if I could actually do it fast enough to force more containers into to be needed. No. So there's 13. Anyways, so that's basically what we can show.
This is good then, and so I wonder with serverless, with the function being invoked, serverless invokes a function and returns the payload.
Returns the payload.
Basically, just spins up a pod when needed, correct?
Yes, that's right. Now, the level of caching that it does with those, that the system does, is where I'm not quite clear on yet. The idea is you can scale to 0. So, but I don't know what the timing is on that. The idea is, yes, it spins up a container, a pod in whatever container, so a pod, for each invocation of the function. That was my understanding. This doesn't seem to be showing that, so there's some work to figure out here. But we can show that, like, we just deployed it, you put a little bit of load on it, and it's responding to that, right? So we see 13 invocations. It's showing 2 pods, right? So, and this could be a redraw issue. This could be a cache issue. I don't know. I would expect, you see, so there it was. So we went from the 13. It's taken its time to get to the system. So I did a whole bunch. That spiked to 31, and now we're back down to 1 request. My expectation, and I don't know how long it's going to take before this becomes 1. Oh, well, there you go. So it's back down to at least the 1, because we have 0 requests. So you can show, like, dynamic behavior, right, at the function level, which is what we did here. But the optics of, like, that we hit 0 or whatever is not all there yet. Again, keep reminding them this is alpha, right? We're early on here. So there's another thing you can deploy, which is an app, which actually you would hit on the web page, but it has kind of the same behavior. And when I did that and did, return, like, show me hello world again and again, it didn't spike at all on the containers. And I think that could be web page caching or something else, right? So, so again, haven't figured it all out and got it really dialed in so that it's like magic. But you can show, and a lot of folks are enough already here, like, what did you show? Well, you have a project, right, where you have your files. You're set up at this point where you can edit, you can edit your code. Although there's not a whole lot to edit here, but, like, for example, right, we added the return so that it's a little cleaner. You can edit your code and then save it, and then automatically it'll get built and deployed, right? So the second that you commit your change, it will go through your pipeline, whatever testing you do, etc. This is a pretty simple pipeline, but it'll build it, it'll deploy it, and so as soon as you make a code change, you'll right to the point of being able to hit it on the command line here and see the difference, right? And you can always, if you want to, also, this is not interesting, but you can show this is not a static, that this is that we're actually doing something. You can do GitLab, etc. That return that. There you go. So it returned hello from GitLab, right? And so again, remember, we're returning JSON. We can change it to text and just return text, but this is a function, so most likely the use of it is going to be to return in something that's machine readable and not as human readable, which is how we're just doing that. And yeah, that's kind of what we got right now. So let's see what serverless function. So you can have multiple ones. So this is kind of the equivalent of like our environments, right? Where you might have like production and staging and whatnot. These are each of your different functions. So here's that second one from the one that I just did.
Diana, what were some of the questions that came up during your meetup delivery?
I think it was really a lot about serverless itself, because I think a lot of people are just kind of, that were there, were kind of just figuring out and exploring. I think I asked for hands, and out of like 20 or 25 people, about 3 or 4 of them are actually, maybe about 5 of them are actively like doing serverless stuff on like Lambda or something. I could see asking, hey, we'll just do Lambda functions. The answer is yes. We're using Knative and triggerless, or triggerless, trigger mesh. We were at least, and so this was set up so that you can, for example, run Lambda, like take a Lambda function and run it in this setup instead of on Amazon. Can you part of this is, we said this is trigger. This is serverless, multi-cloud serverless. So how does that work? The idea is that, like you see us right now, we're deploying the function to Knative, like here in our GitLab installation, but you can change your deployment target, right? So you might say, for example, in dev, I'm going to deploy it locally here and check it and make sure it works, and then turn around in production, send it to Triggerless Cloud, or Trigger Mesh Cloud, or wherever else, Google Functions, etc. So ideally, same code, different target. We haven't put that demo together yet. Actually, we have somebody working on that for KubeCon. So, and then the rest of the questions, honestly, were really about like all the other stuff about what GitLab does, because I showed this, these while we were kind of stalling. A lot of people are still like, wait a minute, you guys are SCM, right? And that's so which is exactly why I did this in the beginning, right? Like, here's SCM, right? And by the way, we're all of this. So even without mentioning GitHub, which someone else will eventually bring up, it made them realize how, like, first of all, like, if we're SCM, why are we here talking to you about serverless, right? That's the first question. And that's why this set aside. But that actually brought up more questions about like the other stuff we do, and the pipeline and the security scanning and all that stuff. So so it was worth bringing that up. And those questions were spawned by that, even though they weren't serverless specific. Yeah.
Excellent. So it's good to know that conversations were not focused just on serverless, but that they did take you outside of that very narrow scope. Yeah.
And we did have, there were some other folks there who talked about Kubernetes and Docker usage, right? And Docker and all that stuff, but somewhat related to the serverless stuff, but more really about Kubernetes, because this was a Kubernetes meetup group, right? Kubernetes and cloud native. So most of the questions were that were focused around Kubernetes and whatnot, because I talked about the review app too, again, for the pipeline. So, yeah.
You mentioned something earlier, Dan. We are still officially in alpha mode on serverless, or are we already GA?
I believe we're calling it this alpha mode. Yeah.
Okay.
I think actually when you go to the docs, maybe you have to come to the docs. Yeah, right here. So yes, we're still in alpha mode. Whatever that means for us, right? I mean,
right.
Right. So I mean, really, we do MVC. What we're saying by that is we're letting people know, like, there's some rough edges here, right? But we are putting together the pieces, the way that GitLab does, piece at a time. And every release, we have more and more of it together. So, but yeah, there are some rough edges, and so yeah, it's still alpha. And I think, that's certainly the case. So.
Well, one last question, and let me know, maybe you had some of these questions as well. My perception is that there's still a bit of, I don't want to say ambiguity, but serverless still seems to mean different things to different people. what would you say is the business value that we are bringing to the table with doing this in GitLab?
Yeah, absolutely great. Um, so the idea of running serverless, which for most folks, they get the idea is I can focus on my function or like my little piece of code, and the value of serverless in general is I don't have to manage the Kubernetes, the underlying infrastructure, right? As a developer, I write my code and it's available. It's out there, right? I don't have to set up the cluster. I don't have to like define the containers. I don't have to do the Docker file creation, all that stuff, right? I just write my code and boom, it's ready. It's available. Now, the other business value is, hey, it scales to zero, right? We're only going to invoke what your code when it actually gets called. So we can scale to zero. We can like basically absolutely as granular as possible minimize the resources that we're using for your code, right? So that's the business value of serverless. The challenge with serverless is it's complex to set up. It doesn't look like it, and you don't realize it because I did it in front of you. And granted, we had to wait for things, but all right, setting up Kubernetes, connecting it, to Kubernetes so you can push your code to it. Setting up Knative is not trivial, and Istio and all those pieces, so that you have a whole functioning setup. It's not trivial to set up, and so. Here is that ability to do that. Now you could say, well, wait a minute, can't I just do Google Functions or Azure Functions or Lambda? You're right. That is the providers, like they do with Kubernetes service, providing serverless infrastructure. But if you're not tied to Lambda, and I think William actually realized and phrased it, I think, best, which is we're talking about as an IT infrastructure or organization, if you need to provide serverless and you don't want everyone to put their stuff on Lambda and you want to provide a serverless service to your internal customers, then this is a way that you can do that, have it set up and running and everything without having to go through all of the pain of figuring out how to set it up and maintain it. So, and you have to do some level of maintenance, but the setup is single click, simple, right? And then it's all within the work stream is all within GitLab, so single tool. Right?
Which plays beautifully well into our mantra of providing boring solutions. One click, you're good to go.
Exactly, and yeah, and this is the summation. This is William's slide, but these are, but yeah, I mean, this is basically what I just said, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me. You get to put your functions in your apps, excuse me, on top of Kubernetes, easy to set up and use, single application. Again, for the people that are doing the coding, same SCM, same interface, same pipelines. Just effectively, serverless has turned into a different target environment, right? Mm-hmm. And then you can manage it as well from there. So I'm not going over to Google Functions and looking at or trying to figure out the Knative interface for getting information about my pods and my invocations and all that. It's right here. Right? So,
great. Yeah. This is really good, and I really appreciate this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being the catalyst for me to get this stuff, get it down. So
I'm delighted that you had the time that we were able to do this and that you were able to walk me through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
How was this received, and how long did your session last?
So I did it in about half an hour, which was the intent was half an hour. It was received well, actually very well, because this was an hour and a half meetup, and there were 3 groups talking. There was these guys talking about doing serverless streaming functions or something. And then Rancher talking about their new K3S, which is pretty exciting, I think, which is their like edge Kubernetes cluster. Anyway, so what happened was the first guy talked all slides almost, but like way deep and way long, 45, 50 minutes. The Rancher guy, and he talked his half an hour or so, And so basically by the time I started, there was like 10 minutes left in the meeting. And everyone had gone through like a lot of pretty deep stuff. So I was like, yeah, I don't know, I think people are gonna walk out. But pretty much everyone stayed. So I say that's a good reception. People stayed and people asked questions and people came up afterwards. And people were like, oh, cool, serverless, right? I think a lot of people hadn't seen serverless, and those who had were happy to see that if there's a path to do it on GitLab. So I think that's a success.
Great. This is very helpful.